Gaslighting. What happens if someone keeps telling you you're insane? At first you laugh. It's absurd. You know the weight of your own mind, the familiar topography of your memories, the solid ground of your senses. But the bulb dims. Just a breath, a momentary sigh of light. And when you mention it, they smile. A gentle, pitying smile. The light is steady. Nothing changed. You must be tired. You're imagining things. Day after day the light stutters, a hiccup in luminance, a jump in the current. Day after day the denial lands, gentle as a feather, heavy as a cinder block. It's the softness that disarms you. The violence is in the negation, not the tone. Soon you stop mentioning the flicker. You watch it in silent, private confusion, wondering if your retinas are betraying you. Soon you stop trusting your own eyes. The internal compass spins, its needle demagnetized. This is gaslighting. Not a simple lie, not an argument over facts, but a systematic replacement of reality itself, a quiet, courteous, insistent erasure. They are not just disagreeing with your map, they are convincing you that north is south, that water flows uphill, that dark is light. We borrow the name from the 1944 film Gaslight. A husband, methodical and charming, dims the gas lamps in their Victorian home, hides a brooch, paces in the sealed attic above. Each time the wife asks, her voice growing fainter, more tentative, he answers with the same velvet certainty. "You're overwrought, darling. You're mistaken. It's all in your mind." By the final reel, she no longer believes the evidence of her senses. She believes only him. Her reality has been outsourced. Real-world gaslighters rarely bother with attic footsteps or antique jewelry. Their tools are simpler, more diabolical in their banality. They simply deny what you both know to be true. "I never said I'd pick you up. You're so forgetful lately." "I never raised my voice. You're exaggerating." The restaurant receipt is in your hand, your memory of the shouting vivid. Still, you find yourself apologizing. The seed of doubt has sprouted. The mechanics are clinical, a four-step erosion. Step 1, chronic, low-grade denial, a drip, drip, drip of contradiction that carves a canyon through your confidence. The foundation develops hairline fractures you cannot see. Step 2, attack the very tools of perception. You're too sensitive. You always overthink things. You're so dramatic. Your lens is declared defective, so the image it captures must be false. Step 3, emotional veto. Your feelings, confusion, hurt, anger are no longer valid responses. They become primary evidence of your defect, proof of your instability. Step 4, isolation. Friends who affirm your reality are toxic. Google searches for "Am I going crazy?" are a sign of paranoia. Diary pages are private overthinking. Each external reference point is removed so their new curated blueprint can set, hardening into your only truth. Eventually, you silence yourself before they can speak. You pre-correct your thoughts. You hand them the chalk, then the board, then the entire classroom of your mind. This is the most intimate theft a human can commit. They steal your inner weather report, your personal barometer for reality, and sell it back to you as a forecast you now accept as gospel. You learn to distrust the rain you feel on your own skin. If you leave, and many do, carrying the invisible architecture of the prison with them, you will still hear their voice in the dark. A phantom line edit on every thought you form, an internalized critic whispering their script. Recovery begins not with a grand revelation, but on the small, tremulous day you trust a flicker again. The moment you say aloud, to yourself or to safe ears, "I saw the light change," and no one contradicts you. And slowly, you begin to believe it.
Guilt-tripping and shame. Guilt says, "I made a mistake." Shame says, "I am the mistake." Manipulators are master dial turners, shifting the needle from the manageable territory of guilt into the existential quicksand of shame. Because while guilt can be addressed and atoned for, shame is glue. It binds you to the idea of your own inherent brokenness. The script is minimalist, a masterpiece of implication. A sigh heavier than an anvil, a slow, disappointed headshake, a quiet, wounded, "after all I've done for you," or "I guess I just expected more from you." No direct request is ever uttered, yet the victim hears the command as clearly as a shout. Repay me with your obedience. Compensate me with your compliance. Children learn this foreign language early. The parent who recounts the agony of labor pains at every minor disagreement, transforming a biological event into a lifelong debt. The friend who tallies favors like a silent, merciless accountant, their kindness always a loan, never a gift. Over decades, the tally becomes a mortgage on the victim's autonomy. To assert a need is to be a deadbeat. Shame inducement is more surgical than guilt tripping. It bypasses actions and targets identity itself, your core competence, attractiveness, moral worth. A partner doesn't just criticize a purchase, they mock your financial acumen, etching irresponsible child into the mirror you shave against every morning. A boss doesn't just correct a report, they question your fundamental intelligence, making fraud feel like your job title. Once you believe the defect is constitutional, a flaw in your very fabric, you will police yourself on their behalf. You become your own warden. Breaking the spell requires a brutal, unemotional audit of the ledgers you carry. Which debts are real? Which are compound interest on love or help that was, in truth, never free? It requires the seismic shift of understanding that true gifts have no strings, and that obligations forged in emotional manipulation are legal tender only in a counterfeit economy. The moment you refuse to pay the illegitimate interest, the phantom ledger disappears. Poof! It was only ever held together by your belief in it. Memory manipulation. Elizabeth Loftus, a pioneering psychologist, convinced sober, sane adults they had been lost in a mall as children. All it took was a relative's casual, implanted, "Remember that time you got lost at the mall?" followed by 3 gentle, leading questions. Within a week, subjects didn't just agree, they elaborated. They recalled the yellow balloon they clutched, the kind old security guard with a mustache, the tart taste of the orange Julius they were given. The mind abhors a vacuum. It spackles gaps with the most plausible grout it can find. Fiction, dressed in the comfortable clothes of familiarity, becomes memory. Here is the unsettling truth. Every memory retrieval is a rewrite. We don't pull a perfect file from a neurological cabinet. We reconstruct the scene each time we recall it, influenced by our current emotions, suggestions, and beliefs. Tell the story often enough, especially with others, and the rough draft becomes scripture, polished by consensus. Couples argue over vacations that never quite happen the way either vividly remembers. Eyewitnesses swear on Bibles stuffed with synthetic, suggestion-born recall. The manipulator seeds the edit with the precision of a film director. "Are you sure it wasn't louder? More violent?" Injects intensity. "I remember you smiling when you said that." Injects false emotion. "Everyone else remembers it that way." Injects social proof. Repeat, reinforce, socialize. Soon the new edited scene feels warmer, more logical, more real than the old faded original. The old memory file isn't just misfiled, it's overwritten, shredded by the mind itself to reduce the dissonance. The defense is not a perfect memory, but radical humility. Hold every memory with open fingers, not a clenched fist. Photograph the receipts, literal and metaphorical. Invite second eyes from people who weren't there, who can ask neutral questions. Certainty is the favorite food of every would-be editor of your past. Nourish doubt instead. It is your best guardian. Playing on insecurities. Madoff did not simply sell financial returns, he sold exclusion, access. The country club whisper network, the subtle nod that you, yes, you, were finally wise enough, connected enough to be among the elect. Under the glamour of guaranteed returns lay the oldest, most reliable lever in the manipulator's toolbox, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being on the outside. Insecurities are as fingerprint unique as the individuals who carry them. The softness around the waistline, the fear of being perceived as unintelligent, the anxiety over a bank balance, the hunger for social media validation. But the lever is universal: comparison. A partner sighs wistfully at a passing stranger. Suddenly, your own reflection is a courtroom where you are perpetually on trial. A boss lavishly praises your rival's work in a meeting. You find yourself volunteering for unpaid weekend work, trying to out-earn that praise. The manipulator operates as a malicious market maker. They first gain control of the supply of reassurance related to your specific insecurity. They might even create or amplify the sense of deficiency. You'd be so pretty if you lost a few pounds, only to then position themselves as the sole supplier of the cure. But I love you just the way you are. You are made to feel both the wound and the relief, keeping you tethered to their approval. The only permanent fix is to delist your stock from their internal exchange. This means sourcing your metrics of worth internally, from your own values, accomplishments, and sense of character. When your self-worth is self-generated, when you know your own value without needing a daily quote, no one can corner the market on it. You become manipulation resistant because you are no longer shopping for a sense of self in their store.
Emotional blackmail. No knives, no raised voices, no overt threats, just a silk lariat of guilt, expertly tossed around your autonomy. The emotional blackmailer never demands, they suffer. Their professed agony, their potential unraveling, becomes the invoice you are expected to pay. The currency? Your boundaries, your needs, your truth. The mafia understood the framework perfectly. The favor bank. A small, unsolicited gift, tickets to a show, a job for your nephew. The generosity feels genuine. Then the quiet tally begins. When the day comes for repayment, a shady business deal, a lie to the authorities, the refusal is framed not as prudence, but as betrayal. The debt feels moral, not monetary. To refuse is to be ungrateful, disloyal, bad. Repaying it feels like virtue, not coercion. In romantic and familial dynamics, the currency is intimacy and care. If you leave, I'll fall apart translates to, you must stay and absorb my damage to be a good person. After everything I sacrificed for you translates to, your life choices are now my property. The victim is presented with a brutal, false choice: cause a catastrophic emotional collapse, the guilt, or sacrifice a piece of themselves, the compliance. They almost always choose the known guilt of self-betrayal over the imagined catastrophe of the other's pain. Freedom arrives on the day you perform a mental surgery, separating your responsibility from their reaction. You realize that someone else's emotional crisis, real or performed, is not your 5-alarm emergency. You can offer empathy, compassion, and resources from the shore, but you do not have to drown with them to prove you care. You can say, I hear that you're hurting, and I am making a different choice. The moment you calmly refuse to pay the illegitimate invoice, the entire ledger, poof, turns to smoke. It was only ever powered by your belief in its validity. Fear-mongering.
Fear is the fastest, most potent download to the ancient limbic system. It compresses complex worldviews into a single, blinding command: survive now. When the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex, nuance, logic, and long-term thinking are the first casualties. The mind enters a binary state: threat or safe, friend or foe. Salem, 1692. A spiritual fever becomes a witch hunt. One accusation, then 10, then hundreds. Logic, spectral evidence is impossible, was shouted down by the louder, more visceral logic of panic. The community, to feel safe, burned itself clean of difference, of doubt, of dissent. Fear mandated purity, and purity demanded destruction. Modern variants run quieter, but on the same operating system. A banner ad: one missed payment could destroy your credit forever, threatens stability. A political ad: they are coming for your job, your values, your neighborhood, threatens identity and tribe. The algorithm doesn't need to threaten your life, it merely needs to threaten your way of life, your status, your children's future. The lever is the same. Amplify perceived vulnerability, then offer yourself as the sole urgent solution. The goal is to keep you in a perpetual state of a low-grade alarm, where the thinking brain is offline and the reactive brain is in charge. A terrified person is a compliant person, eager for orders, for a strong leader, for a simple pill to make the fear stop. The antidote is not fearlessness, but paced engagement. Paced breathing to calm the physiology. Paced questions to re-engage the cortex. Ask, slowly and deliberately, who profits from my pulse racing right now? Who gains power, money, or loyalty when I am in this state of dread? If the answer is not you, then you are not the customer. You are the product. And it is time, consciously, to change the channel.
Stockholm Syndrome. 6 days in a bank vault. The air thick with fear. The outside world a distant rumor. When the police finally cut through, ready for grateful hostages, something inexplicable happens. The captives push past their rescuers, not to freedom, but to shield their captor's body with their own. One hostage will later raise money for the robber's legal defense fund. The press coins a catchy term for the madness. The brain simply calls it survival. The recipe is portable and terrifyingly simple. A perceived threat to your life or safety. Isolation from other perspectives, other voices. Small, unpredictable mercies from the captor. A glass of water, a blanket, a kind word amidst the cruelty. A perceived inability to escape. Under these 4 conditions, primal fear can transmute into attachment faster than champagne goes flat. The captor, who controls both the threat and the relief, becomes the center of the universe. This same ancient circuitry explains 1,000 modern paradoxes: why a child fervently defends the parent who abuses them, why a soldier home from war misses the brutal camaraderie of the platoon that hazed him, why we scroll the social media feed that fills us with anxiety and envy, yet compulsively click like. The bond is not with the source of pain, but with the source of survival within the context of pain. The syndrome is not irrational sentimentality, it is hyper-rational, a brutal cost-benefit analysis conducted by a terrified mind. The goal? Minimize immediate danger, maximize the chance of the hand that feeds you continuing to do so. The moment the outside world, the police raid, the foster system, civilian life, feels more unpredictable and threatening than the familiar, patterned control of the captor, loyalty is guaranteed. It is the devil you know, institutionalized. Learned helplessness. Seligman's dogs could have walked away.
They had walked away on day one when they first felt the shock and found the escape. But after repeated, random, inescapable shocks, pain with no pattern, no correlation to their actions, they lay down, they whined, they took the current. They learned that action was futile, outcome was independent of effort. This is learned helplessness. Humans are not humbler animals. Consider Patty Hearst, newspaper heiress, kidnapped, locked in a dark closet, subjected to unpredictable trauma. Weeks later, she emerges with a machine gun and a new name, Tanya, robbing banks alongside her captors. The world called it Stockholm Syndrome. Psychologists called it a predictable neural adaptation. Unpredictable trauma plus intermittent controlling kindness equals profound rewiring. The brain, desperate for a narrative that minimizes pain, chooses the least terrifying one. They hurt me, but they also feed me, speak to me, give me an identity. The chaotic world outside might hurt more and offer less. Captivity becomes the safer bet. Learned helplessness is the quiet, haunting echo long after the shouting stops. It is the talented employee who, after the third promotion passed over for opaque reasons, stops updating her resume. Why try? It is the abused spouse who can recite the shelter's address from memory, yet never dials the number. Why risk the unknown? It is the internalized mantra, nothing I do matters, so why do anything? The cure is not a grand, heroic leap. It is micro-victories. One choice, any choice, made and honored. The taste of agency, however small. Choosing what to eat for dinner and eating it. Walking to the end of the block and back. Sending one email. The moment the dog feels the neck strap loosen, even slightly, the paradigm cracks. The shocks become bearable, then understandable, then escapable. Action and outcome slowly, painfully reconnect.
Cultivating dependence. The most effective cage isn't built with bars, but with definitions. First, they remove the alternatives, not by boarding up windows, but by renaming them. Your old friends become toxic, bad influences, people who hold you back. Your family doesn't understand our special bond, is trying to control you. The job market, the world outside, is painted as unsafe, cruel, too complex for someone with your sensitivities. Each warning is delivered not as control, but as protection. The wall is built brick by brick, each labeled care. Stage 2. Insert friction into any independent action. The car you could use is suddenly unreliable. The bus route is dangerous at night. The bank password you set is too complex for you to remember. Let me handle it. Every potential path to autonomy is littered with imagined obstacles. And when you inevitably stumble, because they've ensured you will, the small failure is not a learning moment. It is celebrated, subtly, as proof. Proof you need a guide, a pilot, a handler. Stage 3. Become the sole pharmacy for validation, comfort, and reality itself. Praise, warmth, and affirmation are released in carefully metered doses, never enough to create lasting satiety, never scarce enough to provoke outright quitting. Like a lab rat, the victim learns the exact lever pressure, the perfect behavior that dispenses the pellet of kindness. Your emotional sustenance is outsourced. You forget how to feed yourself. The exit, notably, is never physically barred. It is simply narrated as a cliff edge. Independence is rebranded as abandonment. Self-sufficiency is framed as betrayal. You'll never make it out there without me. No one else will ever love you like I do. The most elegant, inescapable prison is the story you believe, that life outside these walls isn't just harder, but is a form of death. The cage becomes a sanctuary, and the keeper your only savior.
Love bombing. The first week is a parade thrown in your honor, a constant, dazzling celebration of your existence. Every notification is a firework. Every shared Spotify playlist is a love letter written in song titles. You mention a fondness for apricot donuts in passing. By noon, a dozen appear at your door, a sweet, tangible monument to your being heard. The brain, flooded with dopamine and oxytocin, files the entire experience under miracle, fate, finally. This is love bombing. It is not courtship, but calibration. They are not falling in love, they are conducting research, learning the exact voltage that makes your pupils dilate, your heart race, your defenses dissolve. They are mapping your emotional genome to replicate it later as a weapon. Psychologists call this idealization grooming. The target is flooded with more affirmation, attention, and apparent adoration than they have ever received, creating a new, unsustainable emotional baseline, an Everest of regard. After Everest, the ordinary altitude of healthy, reciprocal love feels like suffocation. It feels like loss. Then the pivot, the strategic withdrawal. The texts thin to single gray checkmarks. The plans are canceled. The donuts vanish. The silence is deafening, but more importantly, it is interpretive. The abandoned brain, craving the lost high, becomes the investigator of its own perceived crime. Maybe I talked too much, asked for too little, loved too obviously, wasn't enough. The victim, starved for the earlier drug, starts auditing themselves, trying to earn back the paradise. The cycle is pure slot machine science. Intermittent, randomized reward keeps the lever pulling in motion. A crumb of affection, a lone heart emoji, a midnight I miss you voicemail, and the heart races back to the emotional trough, hoping, praying for the original deluge. The manipulator controls the schedule of payouts, creating a powerful addiction to their approval. Cults use the same algorithm on seekers at the airport gate, showering them with instant belonging. Abusers use it on partners who threaten to leave, reenacting the perfect early days to re-hook them. Corporations use it on new hires, dazzled by signing bonuses and lavish perks that evaporate by quarter two, once loyalty is expected, not earned. Recovery starts not with a grand walkout, but when you notice the pattern is too perfect, too synchronized, too much. Real love is asynchronous. It is occasionally clumsy, sometimes boring, never perfectly symmetrical. It builds. It does not avalanche. If all the arrows of effort, planning, and grand gesture point one way, you are not being loved, you are being targeted. And the moment you see the scope's crosshairs, you can begin to step out of the frame.
Brainwashing. 909 bodies on a Guyanese morning. Not captives in chains, but believers. People who lined up, lifted paper cups to their lips, and drank. How do you make 900 people volunteer for oblivion? You don't preach death on day one. You preach community, purpose, a colorblind heaven on earth, a sanctuary from a corrupt world. Then you tighten the aperture, degree by imperceptible degree. Stage 1. Isolate the lens. You move the congregation a continent away from skeptical aunts, concerned parents, and the nightly news. You control the mail, the loudspeaker, the very vocabulary. Words are redefined. When the only adjective you hear for the outside world is decadent, fascist, sinful, the jungle ceases to be a prison. It becomes the only safe cell in a burning world. Stage 2. Destabilize the tripod. The mind needs stability, sleep, routine, predictable cause and effect. You remove it. Sleep is shortened. Meetings stretch past midnight, a fog of exhaustion descending.
Rules shift, blame is randomized for offenses no one understood. The mind, exhausted and unmoored, hands the steering wheel to anyone who still speaks in complete, confident sentences. Critical thought is a luxury of the well-rested. Stage 3. Indoctrinate through operant conditioning. Reward parroting, punish curiosity. Praise is delivered in group chants, a warm, enveloping sonic bath of belonging. Dissent is delivered alone in a plywood box under the equatorial sun, or through cold, terrifying silence. The brain learns fast. Conformity brings the warmth of acceptance. Questioning brings the cold of exile. It chooses warmth, and in doing so, surrenders its sovereignty. Stage 4. Reinforce through ritual. You ritualize everything, the white knight rehearsals, the revolutionary suicide drills, until the rehearsal feels like destiny, a familiar path. The unthinkable becomes procedural. By the time the vat of cyanide-laced Flavor Aid appears, the central question is not, why are we dying, but how could we possibly stay alive in the fascist world that awaits us outside? The outside has been successfully defined as a fate worse than death. The mechanics are chillingly portable. Political cells, multi-level marketing schemes, abusive romantic partnerships, extremist online forums. Any system that can monopolize information, induce fatigue, and control rewards can draft its own private Jonestown in a basement, a chat room, a suburban home. The exit door is often visible, always technically unlocked, but the corridor leading to it is lined with funhouse mirrors that distort and whisper, "You are nothing without us. You will fail. You are unworthy." Most stay not because they cannot leave, but because walking out feels like stepping into a psychological vacuum, a void of identity. The antidote is less heroic than we wish for in the movies. It is a second voice, a second book slipped under the door, a friend, a relative, a stranger who says, "I saw the sky outside your compound. It's still blue. The world is wider than they told you." The moment two competing realities are allowed to coexist in the mind, the wash cycle stalls. The brain, presented with an alternative narrative, begins its slow, painful work of comparison and eventually choice.
Triangulation. Enter the phantom third, the invisible audience, the hypothetical competitor. A casual, offhand remark, "You know, Sarah at the office thinks you overreacted too." Instantly, the intimate dyad of you and me becomes an unstable triangle of you, me, and them. Whether Sarah actually exists or holds that opinion is irrelevant. The mere introduction of an outside, judging presence destabilizes the ground. You are no longer navigating a relationship, you are managing perceived public opinion within it. Romantic manipulators flirt with ghosts, mentioning exes who never complained, praising baristas for their looks, inventing secret admirers. The victim stops evaluating the health of the relationship based on their own needs and starts competing for the top position on a phantom leaderboard. The focus shifts from, "Is this good for me?" to, "Do I measure up?" Workplaces use the same geometry with ruthless efficiency. Employee A is lavishly praised on Monday. Employee B is held up as the example on Tuesday. Both, hungry for that validation, scramble desperately for Wednesday's approving pat, often at the expense of collaboration and their own well-being. The manager sits at the apex, their favor the prize that keeps the competition fierce and the workers divided. The emotional power is profound. It creates performance anxiety where there should be connection. It substitutes intimacy with surveillance. You begin to see yourself through the imagined eyes of the third, distorting your own self-perception. The exit strategy is a deliberate, conscious straight line back to two.
It requires asking the core question, blocking out the imagined chorus. Would I want this relationship? Would I accept this treatment if no one else was watching? If there were no scoreboard, no Sarah, no ex, no rival employee? If the answer is a clear no, the triangle collapses from a confusing 3D shape into a simple binary decision. You stop playing a game whose rules were designed for you to lose.